The Chrysalids, Chapter 6, Part 2. And a shocking sight it must have been at first, too. You can see giant distorted heads of corn, growing higher than small trees, big moss-like plants growing on rocks, with roots trailing out in the wind like bunches of hair, meters long, and in some places there are mushroom colonies that at first you would think them to be big white boulders, and you can see succulent plants as big around as barrels, and with spines on them 10 feet long. There are plants which grow on the cliff tops and send thick green cables down hundreds of feet or more into the sea. And you wonder, is that some kind of land plant that's got to the salt water, or a sea plant that's somehow climbing ashore? Oh, there are hundreds of kinds of stranger things than that, and scarcely a normal one among them. It's like a jungle of deviations out there, going on for miles and miles. And there don't seem to be so many animals, but occasionally you'll catch sight of one, though you'd never be able to name it. There are a fair number of birds, though, seabirds mostly. Once or twice, people have seen big things flying in the distance, too far to figure out anything about it, except the motion of it doesn't look right for birds. Oh, it's a weird, evil land, and many a man who sees it suddenly understands what might happen around here if it weren't for our purity laws and our inspectors. It's bad, but it ain't the worst part. Further south still, you begin to find patches where only the coarsest plants will grow, and very poorly at that. And soon you come to stretches of coast and land behind it, 20, 30, 40 miles long maybe, where nothing grows, nothing at all. The whole seashore is empty, black, harsh, empty. The land behind looks like a desert of charcoal, and where there are cliffs, they are sharp-edged, with nothing to soften them. There are no fish in the sea either, no weeds, not even slime, and when a ship has sailed there, even the barnacles will fall off the bottom of the ship and leave the hull nice and clean. You don't even see birds. Nothing moves, except those waves breaking against the black beaches. It's a frightful place. Captains order their ships well away from it, out of fear, and very relieved are the sailors to follow that order. And yet it can't always have been like that, because there was one ship whose captain was foolhardy enough to sail close to the shore. Her crew was able to make out great stone ruins in the distance, and they all agreed that they were far too regular to be natural, and they thought they must be the remains of one of those old people cities. But nobody knows any more about them. Most of the men in that ship wasted away and died fairly soon, and the rest were never the same afterwards. So no other ship has risked keeping so close in. But for hundreds of miles, the coast goes on being badlands, with stretches of the dead blacklands. So far, in fact, that the first ships that went down there gave up and turned around, because they thought they would never reach a place where this would end. The preachers and the church people were pleased to hear it, for that was very much what they had been trying to teach us, and for a time it made people lose interest in exploring. But later on, the curiosity revived, and better-made ships sailed further south again. An observer on one of these ships, a man called Marther, wrote a journal in which he published something like this. The Black Coasts would appear to be an extreme form of badlands, since any close approach to them is likely to be fatal. Nothing can be said of them with certainty, but that they are entirely barren, and in some regions are even known to glow dimly on dark nights. Such study as has been possible at a distance, however, does not confirm the view of the church party that they are the result of unchecked deviation. There is no evidence whatsoever that they are a form of sore on the earth's surface that is spreading to other regions. Instead, the opposite seems more likely. This is to say that just as wild country will soon become farmable, and badlands country slowly gives way to fringes country, so it would seem these blacklands are shrinking within the badlands. Observations at the necessary distance cannot be detailed, but those that have been made indicate consistently that living forms are in the process of encroaching upon this fearsome desolation. That was one of the parts of the journal that got Martha into a lot of trouble with very strict church people, for it implied that deviations, far from being a curse, were actually performing the work of reclaiming this lost land. And along with half a dozen other things he said, it landed Martha in court and started people wanting to ban any further explorations. In the middle of all the fuss, however, a ship named the Venture, which had years before been given up for lost, came sailing home to Rigo. She was battered, undermanned, her canvas sails were patched, and her condition was most foul. But she triumphantly claimed the honor of being the first ship to reach the lands south of the Black Coasts, and she brought back a number of objects, including gold, silver, and copper ornaments, and a cargo of spices to prove it. The evidence had to be accepted, but there was a lot of trouble over the spices, for there was no way of telling whether they were deviational or actually the product of a pure strain of plant. Strict churchgoers refused to touch them for fear they might be tainted. Other people preferred to believe that they were the spices referred to in the Bible. Whatever they were profitable enough to now call for ships to sail south in search of them. The lands down there just aren't civilized. Mostly, they don't have any sense of sin. So, they don't stop deviations. And where they do have a sense of sin, they've got it mixed up. A lot of them aren't ashamed of being mutants. It doesn't seem to worry them when their children turn out wrong, provided they're right enough to live and learn how to look after themselves. But other places, though, you'll find deviations who think they're normal. There's one tribe where both the men and the women are hairless, and where they think that hair is the devil's mark. And there's another where they all have white hair and pink eyes. In one place, they won't even think you're properly human unless you have webbed fingers and toes. In others, they don't allow any woman who is not multi-breasted to have children. You'll find islands where the people are all short and thick, others where they're tall and thin. There are even said to be some islands where both the men and women would pass as the true image if it weren't that some strange deviation turned their skin completely black. Even though that's easier to believe than the one about a race of deviations that has shrunk in size to about 2 feet high, has grown fur and a tail, and is taken to living in trees. All the same, it's stranger down there than you'd ever wonder. Pretty near anything seems possible once you've seen it. It's very dangerous in those parts too. The fish and the other things in the sea are bigger and fiercer than they are here. And when you go ashore, you never know how the local deviations are going to respond to you. Some places they might be friendly. In others, they'll shoot poisoned arrows at you. On one island, they'll even throw bombs at you, made of pepper wrapped in leaves, and when it gets in your eyes, they charge you with their spears. You just never know. Sometimes, when the people are friendly, you can't understand a thing they're trying to say, and they can't understand you. But more often, if you listen a little, you'll find out that some of their words are like our own, but pronounced differently. And you find out some strange, disturbing things. They all pretty much have the same legends about the old people that we have. How the old people could fly, how they used to build cities that could float on the sea, and how any of them could speak to any other hundreds of miles away, and so on. But what's more worrying is that most of them, whether they have 7 fingers, 4 arms, covered in hair, or whatever it is that's wrong with them, they seem to think that their type is the true pattern of the old people, and that anything else is a deviation. It seems silly at first, but when you find more and more kinds just as convinced of it as we are ourselves, well, you begin to wonder a bit. You start asking yourself, well, what real evidence have we got about the true image? You'll find that the Bible actually doesn't say anything to contradict the people of that time being the same as us. But on the other hand, it doesn't give any definition of man either. No, that definition we follow comes from that book, Repentances, written by that man Nicholson. And he even admits in the book that he was writing hundreds of years after tribulation came. So you find yourself wondering whether he even knew if he was the true image, or whether he only thought he was.